So we've been working with NASA for about a year and a half. NASA's been tasked to develop a traffic management program so that the Amazon delivery doesn't run into the pizza delivery down the road. It's, you know, when we're actually doing those type of events. Last year we flew 4 aircraft simultaneously, but they just took off and they did nothing. They just, so that NASA could see that they were airborne and our computers were talking with NASA. This year, as you saw, we were flying complex missions, and the biggest thing about this year is that the pilots were not at the aircraft. The pilots were inside the building at our command center, flying from computer stations beyond line of sight of the pilot. So we had visual observers at the aircraft, launching them, getting them prepped for flight, and then watching them while they flew. But the pilots were inside the building, never seeing their aircraft. And then from that point, we started off flying 1 aircraft at a time just to prove the concept, went to 2, went to 3, today we got to 4 for the first time. And then we launched the flight that you saw. We launched the 4 aircraft search and rescue scenario, and we reprogrammed the center aircraft, simulating that a survivor, the hiker survivor, was potentially spotted somewhere, and we wanted to reroute that 1 aircraft to take a look. That involved some computer work to change the flight plan and communicate that to NASA in California. And they're watching this whole thing as we're doing this. And it also involved us changing the flight plan of 2 other aircraft, because the aircraft we rerouted was now going to infringe on the ground tracks of the other 2, and we had to hold those so that there would not be a conflict. And NASA is watching to see first that we're communicating that, and then also to make sure that their software can see a conflict arising and that we are taking steps to mitigate the conflict. It was a huge success. The first time we tried it, and it went off, well, basically without a hitch, so we're really happy. Now we're going to move outside the triangle, and we're going to fly in the airport traffic pattern. If manned aircraft come into the pattern, then we can only fly 1 aircraft at a time out there. If there's nobody in the pattern, then we're going to launch 3 of them and fly a runway. These are all real-time scenarios. So 1 aircraft's going to fly a box pattern all the way around the 12,000-foot runway, and that's going to take 12 to 15 minutes. That's a long flight. The runway's 2 miles long. Simultaneously, we're taking an aircraft off, and there's a bridge at the end of the airfield. A creek goes into a bridge, and we're simulating flooding. Not hard to simulate after yesterday. So we're going to look at the creek and then make sure the bridge, there's no damage to the bridge due to that flooding. And the 3rd scenario is what is called a Part 77 surface inspection. That's what airports have to do to make sure that trees don't grow to a certain height, a certain distance from the runway. So we're going to take all 3 aircraft off, pretty much from the ramp right out in front of you, and then they'll all go and do their own missions simultaneously. Just 1 after that, and we're going to intentionally make the bridge inspection aircraft go rogue, simulating that for some reason it went stupid and it's just flying its own thing, and we're going to see if NASA's system can detect that and what we do with the other aircraft. So we would, if that really happened, we would probably put those in a hold, or we'd make everybody come home. So that's what the last scenario will be.
Importance of why NASA's here?
Yeah, well, NASA is trying to develop a program that will not only know up front what each aircraft, so Amazon, Walmart, Google, whoever's doing deliveries, and Domino's and Pizza Hut, and they want a program similar to what we have with regular air traffic. Air traffic controllers watching those flights, making sure, in all those flights, commercial air traffic starts with a flight plan. So they put in a flight plan that says, here's where I'm starting, here's where I'm going, here's the altitude, here's the airspeed. It figures all that out and keeps other aircraft from being in the same piece of sky at the same time. NASA's been tasked to do the same thing in the low altitude structure for unmanned aircraft, so that the pizza delivery does not run into your computer being delivered by Amazon. That's what this whole NASA program is about. It started they've been working on it for a long time, but we actually started flight ops last year. This year we've expanded the flight ops. Next year we'll see what they learn from this year, and I'm sure next year will be something even more complex.
What does this mean for just technology and how quickly it's moving and unmanned, aircraft? What do these tests mean for the future of that?
Well, it means that today we have it figured out, and tomorrow some of the technology that we use today is obsolete. I mean, that's how fast it is changing, especially in this industry. Things that have to be solved yet are, it's good to have a flight planning program that can tell where everything is supposed to be, but there will be things that aren't communicating with that program. Somebody who gets an unmanned aircraft, a drone, if you will, for Christmas, and they just take the thing off and fly it. It's not talking to anybody. Technology needs to get to the point where the platforms themselves, the aircraft themselves, have some sort of detect and avoid capability to see that and avoid it. And not just flying stuff. Somebody puts up a building and a crane shows up, all of a sudden there's an impediment to flight in this structure where these aircraft are going to be flying. So can they detect it and then avoid it? And there's a lot of things involved in that. There's the detect part is, we're well on our way of solving that, with radars and in different ways of seeing what's out there flying. The issue, one of the big issues is when you see it, if the aircraft is 2 or 3 miles away from where it took off, do you still have a command and control link from the controller, whether it's handheld or like in here, where you can actually talk to the aircraft and control it, make it stop, make it turn, make it land. That's another issue that has to be solved, and we're working on that also.
This seems like it's basically a brand new industry. So how important is it for here in Central New York to be almost pioneering the efforts?
Well, it's very important, and based on the infrastructure that we had, I mean, Griffiss was selected as a test site because we had a ton of radar manufacturers in the Central New York area, because we had this airfield with 12,000 feet of runway, and because we have airspace for doing research and development. The military operating areas that are to the north here are very strategically located away from commercial traffic. So all those pieces are what NASA, or what the FAA looked at in deciding that New York State would be one of the 6 test sites out of 55 proposals that went in to be a test site. So what that's doing is it's driving different businesses here, and we're seeing it already where they come here to test. Some are moving here permanently. We have at least 2 tenants on the field that moved here after we were announced as a test site. A lot of them are transient. They come here and they'll spend 3 days to 3 months living on the economy, testing their equipment, then they go back. And we've had Lockheed Martin's been here 5 times from Owego. Big companies, small companies. It's driving economic impact to the area.
So the 4 aircrafts, basically, is that the first time that's ever really happened for NASA?
Well, we flew 4 last year, but they just took off, separated, and just flew very small patterns. They were not complex ground profiles. Today's was really complex, and what made it even more complex is that we did it from inside the building.
So is that the first time that's ever really happened?
It's the first time it's happened here.
Okay. There
are 6 other test sites, and they're all participating in this NASA program to a different extent. Everybody has their own strengths. Radar and ground-based sense and avoid is our strength, and that's how we're going, the road we're following. They're all following different roads. I'm sure that at least some of them are flying them from inside, beyond line of sight of the pilot. I'm not sure if they all are or not.
Okay.
Figure out what UAS is going to look like in the National Airspace System come 2020. So our point, each test site does different things. We are responsible for detect and avoid sensing equipment. They have a number of companies that are represented here, local, that have different kinds of sensors here. And what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how do we integrate the UAS with manned aircraft. So that's why we're here at an airport. We're moving towards full integration of small UAS into the National Airspace System so that they can mix relatively seamlessly with manned aircraft within the next few years.
So for the